Hello everyone, this is Atin Handuja, founder and CEO of Legal Foxes. I welcome you all to the webinar sessions and I hope you all are safe. Today we have our session on the topic discussion on P. Chidambaram and Rohit Tandon case in special reference to money laundering. And we have Ms. Kinori Ghosh here. She is managing partner at RG Legal Associates, New Delhi. Ma'am has personally dealt with RG Tandon case. I welcome you to the session, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, a little about myself. I have been practicing for the last 5 years in Delhi. I started my practice under Mr. Vikas Pava, senior advocate. So he is a landmark stature in criminal law who has dealt with PMLA cases and other white collar crime cases. So it was under his tutelage that I have got the chance to assist an offshoot of Mr. Chidambaram's case. So thereafter, I have my own law firm based in Calcutta and Delhi, and I've been doing white collar crimes mainly, predominantly. And I also thank Atin and Legal Foxes for giving me this opportunity to come here and speak, throw some light about the intricacies of this beautiful act and how time again this act has been amended.
Ma'am, I can't hear you.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah, ma'am.
Okay. So this Prevention of Money Laundering Act, now this act has a history why it was brought in. So if we see the object of this act, now in the late 90s, there was a lot of illegal activities going all across the globe, not just India, but all across the globe. So it was then when UN called for a meeting and all the contracting states came, and they wanted to, why was this done? Because the money from the illegal activity was being pushed to the financial system of every country, be it India or other places. And this is called laundered money. Now, any money which is being earned from an illegal activity and that money is being pushed to the financial system of a country is called money laundering. This process is called money laundering. To curb that, all the contracting states had formulated special acts. So we see that the preparation of this act had started in the late 90s, but it was only in 2002 that this bill was introduced, and finally it came as an act in the year 2005. In the year 2000, yes, in the year 2002. Sorry, in the year 2002. Thereafter, multiple amendments have been done in order to strengthen the limbs of this act. And we have seen there was some ambiguity also in this act, and we have seen how various high courts and Supreme Courts have dealt with this act. So if anybody is interested to go into the background of this act, they can go about how the contracting states worked. It's given in the object part of that act. Apart from this, the two major cases under this act in the recent past is the first one of Mr. Rohit Tandon. It was one of the first cases after demonetization was declared by our Honorable Prime Minister in the year 2017, November 2017. So 2016, sorry. And post that, recently we've seen a lot of developments last year in the Mr. P. Chidambaram's case. So Mr. P. Chidambaram is involved in a lot of cases, but today we will deal with the INX Media case. Now, interestingly, he was never named as an accused in the original ECIR, Now, the FIR, we know, is registered in the police station. So this act does not get its own clause on its own. Only when there is a scheduled offense given in the schedule and cognizance of that scheduled offense has been taken. That scheduled offense can be under IPC, can be under NDPS, Arms Act, or any act as given under the schedules of PMLA Act. Now, only when those offenses have been committed, at the concerned police or CBI or whatever investigating authority has registered an FIR on those sections, on those predicate offenses, it is then when ED gets its clause to look into whether the laundered money, whether the illegal money gained out of those illegal activities is pushed into the financial systems. Now, that is how this case also happened. Now, I'll go into a little background of Mr. Chidambaram's case. So the original ECIR, now ED registers Economic Cognizance Information Report, did not mention Mr. P. Chidambaram as an accused. There were other people who was mentioned. Now, the background of the case is that while Mr. Chidambaram was the finance minister way back in 2007, Indrani Mukherjee and Peter Mukherjee, two of the media barons of the media industry who used to run INX media houses, had approached Ministry of Finance for getting certain clearance. They wanted downstream investment into their company known as INX Media and INX News. And FIBP board, that is Foreign Investment Promotion Board, had given them the permission of only rupees 4.62 crores as FDI permission. Now what happened is they, instead of, and this permission was given to INX Media, not to INX News. Instead of 4.62 crores, rupees 305 crores was pushed to INX Media. And the value of each share was determined to be rupees 10. What the permission came for rupees 10, but the value of each share came to be 862 rupees per share. Now, what happened? How this came into the light was the IT department had sent certain questionnaire to the FIBP board, and that's how the entire matter came into light. Now, if we go through the judgments of the Honorable Supreme Court and of the Delhi High Court, we'll see a chronological order. It states that when the information had reached that there is an investigation on part of the income tax officers about how this money has come in, surprisingly, one of the accused had approached Mr. Chidambaram's son, Karti Chidambaram, and as per the records available in the various judgments relating to this case, it states that Mr. Karti Chidambaram had received an honorarium of rupees about 3.62 crores as part of bribe in order to suppress the matter on the onboard members of FIBP. So this is the basic crux of the case. So these are all allegations leveled by the ED officers, and the matter is subject in the criminal court. So we have to wait for the outcome of the criminal court in order to ascertain whether this had happened, the criminal conspiracy had happened or not. So we have seen a lot of high voltage drama of how bails were dismissed, surrender applications were given, but earlier securing bail was very difficult under PMLA Act owing to the twin conditions under Section 45. But the Honorable Supreme Court in the month of November, in the famous case of Nikesh Tarachand, when Mr. Rohit Tandon was also one of the petitioners, it was a batch of petition dismissed by Justice Rohinton Nariman. It was allowed by Justice Rohinton Nariman. So it was in this judgment where Mr. Nariman goes back to the date of Magna Carta. Now, Magna Carta came back sometime in 1215 AD. It was in that time also where personal liberty was spoken about. So he said that you cannot impose certain conditions. So, but however, we see such conditions now in the Companies Act under SFIU investigation. Those conditions are also there in Narcotics Act, but under PMLA, Justice Nariman has rendered them unconstitutional. So hence, securing bail has been a little easy now. Earlier, it was very difficult because the language of the section was that the court had to record reasons for belief that the person is not guilty of that offense. That amounts to recording an order of acquittal. Now, before trial, before everything, how can a court record an order of acquittal? So that was literally not possible for any court to do so. So hence, when this judgment came, there was much sought relief. It was only after this judgment that Mr. Rohit Tandon also managed to secure his bail in the ECIR pertaining to money laundering from Honorable Delhi High Court. So this is the background. And for Mr. Rohit Tandon's case, he is related to 2 ECIRs, out of which in one ECIR he was arrested, and in the other one he was never arrested. So in the second ECIR that he was arrested and he obtained a bail, the allegation was that he, along with other accused persons, has deposited money in order to siphon them from, in order to convert them from the demonetized money to value of monetized value. So here I'll delve upon how money is basically laundered in the systems, because money laundering being a very technical act and it's a code in itself. It's a code where we do not need to look beyond the provisions of this act. We need to look into the provisions of this act, as it's a code in itself. It has everything. It is related to attachment, seizure, provisional attachment, time frame, arrests, and everything. And one very important word that has been used by the legislature, and the intent of the legislature is that there has to be sufficient reasons to record for doing any action under this act by the ED officers, be it arrest, be it provisional attachment, be it attachment by the authority. So what is money laundering? Now, money laundering is when, as I've already said, when the money obtained from illegal activities is infused into the financial system. Now, how is this done? This is very important. This is done by 3 stages, which is first is placement, second is layering, and third is integration. Now, I will go into details of this in a while. What is placement? The word placement means that the person who has laundered the money is holding that money generated from various criminal activities, will try to introduce into the financial systems. And how would he do that? By purchasing bank drafts, by negotiable instrument, or siphoning the money to tax havens. We know Bahamas and Cyprus and a lot of other countries where there are a lot of no restrictions on tax as such. So the money is infused there. Then is the second stage. It is also the middle stage. It's called layering. Now, what is layering? This process is very important for a person who is involved in money laundering. Why? Because it is in this process that a person tries to remove the origin of the money. The word layering means put as many layers on that money so that the origin of that money is not traced back into the accounts. So either by rotating the money, as happened in the Rohit Tandon case, that they put a lot of money into different shell companies, alleged shell companies, which later on in the complaint we found that those accounts were pre-existing and those were not shell companies. So you try to transfer the money into as many accounts or as many hands as possible. Now, the third stage is the integration. Here, the offense is completed. This stage is when sending the laundered money to the legitimate economy after inseparably mixed with legitimate money on through legal sources of income. Then there is, of course, investment in infrastructure, then Benami properties, and that's how. Because by this time, the launderer has managed to mix his laundered money with his legitimate income, and it becomes nearly impossible for any person to separate them, because this act is very clear that you have to attach only that portion of the property or the money which is coming as laundered money. You cannot attach that entire property. So here are the process by which a money can be laundered. Now, this PMLA Act, though brought into 2002, we see its wide ramifications from the year 2005, because that is when it took up that the illegal money came more and more into the financial systems of India. And thereafter, we see a lot of amendments in this act as late as even 2019, so as to strengthen the various limbs, to strengthen this act more and more, to give more powers to the investigating officers. So now I'll dwell upon the sections of these act is very important. Now we hear a word, proceeds of crime. We have heard this word in almost all money laundering cases. Now what is this proceeds of crime? Now, like in the case of Mr. P. Chidambaram, as Honorable Supreme Court rightly says that there are allegations of his son, Mr. Karti Chidambaram, receiving certain money from INX Media into certain companies where he is the heart and soul, and by virtue of which he has managed to influence members of FIDP board. Now, this revelation comes after statement of Indrani Mukherjee, who is now an approver. Now, how does a person turn approver is another different set of legal questions. So on this set, we will see that how that just because he has received the money, there is an apprehension or there is reasonable doubt casted upon him that he might have been involved. So here in this act, the reason to believe or the presumption is very high upon the presumption is high upon the accused person, whereas reason to believe on the investigating officer is very high. He needs a single reason to believe, and that's how a criminal prosecution can be launched. This is one of the primary aspects of this act. Now, for Mr. P. Chidambaram's case, as we see that the FIR, that the regular case, its regular case under CBI was registered on 15/5/2017. Thereafter, he joined investigation, and it has been one of the contention of the Honorable ASG and the investigating officer that he has been giving evasive answers. So after that, when he felt there was a need for filing an anticipatory bail, Mr. Chidambaram filed an anticipatory bail on 23rd of July 2018 before the Honorable Delhi High Court. Honorable Delhi High Court granted him interim protection, ultimately on till 20th of August 2019, and ultimately on 20th of August dismissed his bail application in the year 2019. Thereafter, the next day, that is 21st of August 2019, he was arrested by CBI. Now, when he was arrested, his anticipatory bail was pending before the Honorable Supreme Court, which ultimately came to be as infructuous. And we have seen senior counsels arguing for his immediate release and everything, but that did not happen. The CBI got his 10 days of police custody, where it was important that he is put across all the evidences collected. He thereafter, his anticipatory bail in regard to the PMLA case was also pending before the Honorable Supreme Court, which came to be dismissed. As Supreme Court, in the recent times, we've seen that the law has changed and is saying that economic offenses is a grave offense because people's hard-earned money are being toiled and played with. So there has to be no bail in such situations. So this order of dismissal came on 5th of September, yes, 5th of September 2019. Immediately on the same day, Mr. Chidambaram filed an application for surrender, which came to be dismissed before the trial court. Thereafter, on 11/10, that is on 11th of October 2019, ED files an application for his arrest, for his formal arrest and for remand of police custody, which was eventually allowed. Now, this was allowed because the ED has stated in his application, which is available on the judgment of the Supreme Court, that there has been 17 overseas bank accounts opened by him and his conspirators. To have a confrontation about those accounts, his custody was essential. Thereafter, he was officially arrested by ED on 16th of October 2019. Now, in the meantime, he was given 7 days of police custody in that case, also in the ED case also. In the meantime, on 22nd/10, that is approximately 3-4 days from his custody, Delhi High Court granted him regular bail in the CBI case, that is the predicate offense case. So now when he has obtained bail in the predicate offense, and as we see, the act also says that the trial of the predicate offense and the trial under this act has to commence together. So if you have obtained bail, and since there is no twin condition under this act anymore, as rendered unconstitutional by Justice Nariman in the Nikesh Tarachan judgment, it is incumbent upon any defense lawyer that your client will get bail. But Delhi High Court did not grant him bail, even though all the conditions of bail were satisfied, that he's not leaving the country, he cannot tamper with witness because all the witnesses have deposed, all the evidence is documentary. Delhi High Court did not grant him bail. He went up to Supreme Court, and Supreme Court on 4th of December granted him bail after noting down that despite it being a criminal offense and money laundering being a heinous crime these days, economic offense being on a rise, yet Mr. P. Chidambaram has surrendered his passport and has abided by the fact that he will not give any press conference related to the case and will not violate any terms of the bail. So we have seen that he has got a bail. Now, the entire crux of this entire case was with regard to one word, and it's not related to this case. Every PMLA case, a person will come across a word time and again number. It's proceeds of crime. Now, it is very important to understand what does it mean by proceeds of crime. So I'll quickly go through that. Okay, so proceeds of crime means any property derived or obtained directly or indirectly by any person as a result of criminal activity relating to a scheduled offense of the value of such property. And section 3 money laundering, and it has been amended as late as in 2019 by the Finance Act. I'll go through this also. Whoever directly or indirectly attempts to indulge or knowingly assists or knowingly is a party or is actually involved in any process or activity connected with the proceeds of crime, including its concealment, possession, acquisition, or use, it or claiming as untainted property shall be guilty of the offense of money laundering. This was further enhanced by 2019 Act, which is projecting as untainted property, claiming untainted property in any manner as so whatever, and the process of activity connected with the proceeds of crime is a continuing activity and continues till such time a person is directly or indirectly enjoying the proceeds of crime by its concealment or possession or acquisition or use or projecting is at untainted property or claiming it as untainted property in any manner whatsoever. So here we see from the original act which came about in 2003 till in 2020, because the latest amendment came as late as 1/8/2019. This Finance Act of 2019 came to effect from 1st August of 2019. So it's barely 9 months or a little more than that. So we see that how now, even if you're claiming to be in possession of it, you're under the purview or the perimeter of this PMLA Act. So the arms of this, the legislation is very clear of its intent, that whether you know or you don't know, you claim or you don't claim, if at all you're trying to even hide or you are trying to conceal or you possess or you're in acquisition or in use or you're claiming to be in use, then also you will be under the purview of this act. So this section has been immensely strengthened by the Parliament of our country. So next we will go on to the attachment proceedings. Now, attachment, search and seizure, these are the three provisions under which an attachment can be done under section 5, section 17 and section 18. Now, section 5 has the provisional attachment, where if the director or the deputy director or the assistant director, as the case may be, investigating an offense, is of the view and has reasons to believe and has recorded those reasons to believe that attachment is essential, otherwise there'll be it'll be a futile exercise to conduct the trial under the PMLA Act, can attach the property involved in money laundering, and such attachment will be valid for a period of 180 days. Earlier it was 90, now it has been made as 180 days. Now within this 180 days, the authority, the investigating officer can go up to the authority, or as the accused, you can also go up to the authority or to the High Court under Article 226 and 227, invoking your jurisdiction and asking for a release of that property. Now, investigating of authority, if it goes to the adjudicating authority under Section 8. Now, under Section 8, every person or every joint, in case of a joint property, every person will be given a timeline of 30 days to come and defend his claim before the adjudicating authority as to why such property shouldn't be released. Thereafter, after the adjudicating authority passes an order, that same order will be valid for a period of 365 days in case of pending investigation, or in case the matter is already committed to the court for any offense under this act, then the matter stands there before the concerned criminal court. So this is how the entire adjudicating procedure works. Now next we will come under section 19, which is the arrest provision. Now here also there has to be reasons in belief. And Honorable Supreme Court and various other high courts have said that it cannot be a mechanical interpretation of the law where just because there are certain evidences, the IO can arrest. There has to be reasons to believe, and that reason has to be written down in writing as to why the arrest is necessary, and such arrest needs to be made after certain improvements have been made on the investigation, because only then the IO will be sure that there are sufficient reasons to believe as to why such arrest is important. Then we have section 45 bail, which I've already said that how Nikesh Tarachand has helped the entire country under the grips of the twin conditions, and now the twin conditions are rendered unconstitutional. Now let's go back to Mr. Rohit Tandon's case. Now it is one of the first few cases to be registered right after demonetization. So it has a different perspective to its nature. So in Mr. Tandon's case, there were 2 FIRs and there were 2 ECIRs. But today we will deal only with the ECIR where he was arrested, because in the other ECIR he was never arrested, his custody was never sought for. So the predicate offense was of course under cheating, forgery, impersonation, criminal conspiracy and all other things. It was registered as FIR 205 of 2016 at PS Crime Branch. It was registered on 25th December 2016. Now, immediately the next day, that is 26/12, the ECIR was lodged and he was arrested on 28th of December, that same year, 2016. And his associates were arrested later on, the next year on 9th January. And on 23rd of February, the investigating officer or the agency, that is the Enforcement Directorate, had filed the complaint, which is the charge sheet in the Court of Criminal Court, and the investigation is pending. Thereafter, he had filed for bails, which got dismissed from the sessions, then from the High Court. I have been one of the counsels assisting in the matter before High Court. Then he filed before the Supreme Court, where his matter was tagged along with the famous matter of Nikesh Tarachand. But unfortunately or fortunately, his bail got dismissed about 3-4 days before Nikesh Tarachand came to be decided. And the beauty of Nikesh Tarachand, it's one of the landmark cases, I keep on repeating this, is that the judges have told that all the bails pending will go back to his respective courts for its decision now, since there has been a considerable change in the circumstance. But he did not manage to get a bail from the trial court. It happened that he came up to Honorable Delhi High Court, and Justice Mukta Gupta granted him bail, whereby on 10th May 2018, whereby she stated that since section 45 has been struck off by Honorable Supreme Court, and also the allegation that there were fictitious accounts from where the money was being deposited and drafts were taken out, but those were, after investigation it came out that those were not fictitious accounts to be opened on 8th of November, but those accounts operated way before and had transactions going there. So the argument of shell companies is also under investigation and now subject before a trial. So the Honorable Delhi High Court deemed fit to grant him and enlarge him on irregular bail. So this is the 2 cases under PMLA Act, just a brief outline. There are other intricacies involved, but since the matter is under sub judice, it's appropriate not to go into those intricacies.
So shall we move to question and answers now, ma'am?
Sure.
So can we please get to the second link?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Devshri, can you please end